Ever imagine like waking up from a coma, having to relearn how to walk and talk, only to then face a horrifying fate years later?
Oh, wow.
It's the reality for one of the cases that we'll unpack today.
Okay.
You've given us quite a collection of true crime stories,
Yeah.
from shocking accusations against the beloved author to
Mm.
families ripped apart by unthinkable acts.
Wow. So
Yeah, let's dive in.
let's dive in.
These cases certainly explore some dark corners of humanity. What's striking to me is how many touch on themes of power,
Right.
vulnerability, and the systems that either protect or fail us.
Yeah, let's start with the case that's been making headlines. The allegations against Neil Gaiman.
Okay.
You've given us a New York Magazine article detailing accusations from 8 women.
Right. This isn't just a case of he said, she said.
Right.
These women describe a pattern of behavior involving BDSM,
Yeah.
but with their accounts centering on coercion and a clear power imbalance between Gaiman and themselves.
The article really delves into the specifics. We hear from Scarlett Pavich.
Who worked as Gaiman's nanny, alleging that he assaulted her in a bathtub and pressured her into encounters that left her deeply disturbed. She describes being forced into sexual acts to the point of vomiting.
Oh my God.
And this is truly horrific, being made to consume her own vomit.
That's awful.
It's just
Yeah, it's important to note that Gaiman's representatives have categorically denied all these allegations.
Right.
They maintain that all BDSM interactions were consensual and that such practices are legal between adults.
However, the sheer number of accusers, coupled with a reported $300,000 settlement Gaiman reached with another woman. Caroline Wallner raises serious questions. Wallner alleges Gaiman propositioned her while lying in bed with his own child,
Wow.
adding another layer of complexity to this already disturbing situation.
This case really forces us to grapple with the nuances of consent,
Yeah.
especially when there's a stark power differential. It's a reminder that even within seemingly consensual activities, coercion and manipulation can occur. And it highlights the challenges of determining truth and justice when dealing with such sensitive allegations.
Next, we shift gears to a case that hits close to home for many parents. The murder of 14-year-old Caleb Rijos, who was stabbed to death in New York City while simply walking to school.
This case is a tragic illustration of how mental health issues and violence can intersect with devastating consequences.
Yeah.
The perpetrator, Waldo Mejia, had a documented history of both.
Just days before Caleb's murder, Mejia was arrested for stabbing another man and harassing his neighbor. There's even chilling ring camera footage showing him stabbing the camera in a fit of rage.
It's horrifying to consider that this man was free to walk the streets and ultimately to take a young life.
Yeah.
Caleb's father received the call every parent dreads, hearing his son's dying breaths over the phone.
Wow.
It's a gut-wrenching detail that really underscores the human cost of this tragedy.
It certainly makes you question if this could have been prevented. Were there missed opportunities to intervene?
Yeah.
Could stricter enforcement of existing laws,
Right.
coupled with better mental health resources, have made a difference?
These are questions that plague us in the aftermath of such events. They highlight the need for a system that effectively identifies and manages individuals who pose a danger to themselves and others.
Now we turn to a case that initially seems bizarre, but quickly descends into the truly disturbing action. An elderly couple, William and Eileen, were found murdered in their Washington home,
Okay.
their bodies hidden in a freezer.
Adding to the horror, the couple's son Shane and his girlfriend Sue were also found dead in the home, victims of gunshot wounds.
Oh my gosh.
What makes this case particularly perplexing is the timeline.
Yeah.
Shane and Sue lived in the house with the bodies in the freezer for 6 months.
6 months.
6 months.
That's almost unimaginable.
I know, right? And as if that weren't chilling enough, notes were found on the freezer detailing the parents' time of death.
Wow.
As if Shane was meticulously documenting his horrific actions.
So the prevailing theory is that Shane murdered his parents before entering into a suicide pact with Sue. Her online posts from the preceding months detail her struggles with suicidal thoughts.
Right, but the question that lingers is what led Shane to commit such a horrific act against his own parents.
It's a question without easy answers. This case forces us to confront the potential for darkness within family relationships, reminding us that even those closest to us can be capable of unimaginable acts. It also shines a light on the complexities of mental health and how internal struggles can manifest in devastating ways.
And it reminds us how crucial it is to reach out for help when we're struggling. We
Yeah.
can't always understand what's happening in someone's mind, but offering support, being attuned to warning signs, and encouraging professional help can potentially make a difference.
Let's move on to a case that tragically reminds us of the randomness of violence. The Southport stabbing rampage, where 18-year-old Axel Aruda Cubana attacked a dance class, left 3 young girls dead and 10 others injured.
Cubana has pleaded guilty to the charges against him. Yet the lack of a clear motive makes this tragedy even more difficult to process.
Right.
It seems senseless, a cruel twist of fate that shattered young lives and left a community reeling.
Even Taylor Swift, whose music was the theme of the dance class, expressed her shock and grief,
Wow.
highlighting how this tragedy rippled outward, impacting people far beyond the immediate victims and their families.
This case really underscores the importance of community support and resilience in the face of such unthinkable events. It also compels us to consider what measures can be taken to prevent such acts of violence, even when the motives remain shrouded in mystery.
And it speaks to a larger societal anxiety. The fear that such seemingly random acts of violence can occur anywhere at any time, shattering the illusion of safety we often cling to.
Absolutely. It's a fear that's difficult to address, but recognizing it and working collectively to create safer communities is perhaps a starting point.
Switching gears to another case that deeply affected me. The disappearance of 13-year-old Nazia Harris in Detroit. This story is particularly disturbing because it involves allegations of sexual abuse and a potential cover-up within the family.
Jarvis Butts, the father of one of Nazia's cousins, has been charged with her murder. While her body hasn't been found, the evidence against Butts is chilling.
Disturbing text messages between Nazia and Butts paint a clear picture of a predatory relationship. He solicited nude photos and engaged in sexually explicit conversations, demonstrating a classic pattern of grooming behavior.
Further complicating the situation, the text messages reveal Nazia was pregnant and that Butts was aware of it. His internet search history included searches for dangerous and harmful abortion methods, raising serious concerns about his intentions and what might have happened to Nazia.
The judge presiding over Butts' case minced no words, calling him the monster in this whole picture, a sentiment echoed by many. This case is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children, especially within their own families, and the need to create environments where they feel empowered to speak out against abuse.
We have to be vigilant about the signs of abuse, not just in our own homes, but within our communities as well. It's about creating a culture where children are believed, supported, and protected.
Now on to our final case for today. The murder of 25-year-old Heather Williams in North Carolina.
Okay.
What makes this case particularly tragic is that Heather was already a survivor, having overcome a horrific car accident that left her with cognitive impairment.
After months in a coma, she had relearned to walk and talk, demonstrating incredible strength and resilience, yet her life was tragically cut short.
Heather was last seen getting into a car with 30-year-old Tyrell Simmons, a man she had met on Facebook. Simmons was later arrested and charged with her murder. What's infuriating about this case is that Simmons had a documented history of violence.
He had previously been convicted of kidnapping and shooting his former employer, serving only 5 years due to a plea deal.
Wow.
This raises serious questions about the effectiveness of our justice system, particularly when it comes to protecting potential victims from repeat offenders.
Heather's sister Mary has spoken out about her grief and anger, placing the blame squarely on Simmons for exploiting Heather's vulnerability.
Right.
It's a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when the justice system fails to protect those who need it most.
This case compels us to confront the difficult balance between rehabilitation and accountability within the justice system. When second chances result in tragedy, it's a stark reminder that we must prioritize the safety and well-being of potential victims. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. As we delve further into these disturbing true crime cases, I'm struck by the recurring theme of missed opportunities. It feels like there were warning signs, red flags that went unnoticed or weren't acted upon.
That's a chilling observation.
Yeah.
And it certainly seems like a thread that runs through many of these cases.
Yeah.
Take the case of Waldo Mejia,
Right.
the man who killed young Caleb. His history of violence and mental health issues should have raised serious red flags.
Exactly. And the same goes for Tyrell Simmons, who was charged with Heather Williams' murder. His violent past, including a previous conviction for kidnapping and assault, should have made it clear he was a danger to others.
It makes you wonder if there's a breakdown in communication somewhere. Shouldn't there be a better system for sharing information between law enforcement mental health professionals and the judicial system?
That's certainly a critical area for improvement. We need to develop better strategies for identifying and managing individuals who pose a threat to themselves and others. It's not about simply punishing people after the fact, but about proactively preventing these tragedies from happening in the first place.
That's a much more nuanced approach than simply calling for stricter sentencing guidelines,
Right.
which is often the knee-jerk reaction.
While accountability is crucial, we also need to consider the role of rehabilitation and the possibility of reintegration into society. It's a complex issue that requires careful consideration of both individual rights and public safety.
So it's not just about locking people up and throwing away the key.
Precisely. We need to find ways to address the underlying issues that contribute to violence and criminal behavior. That means investing in mental health resources, providing support for those who are struggling, and creating opportunities for rehabilitation.
We've talked a lot about mental health as a factor in these cases.
Yeah.
It seems like many of the perpetrators were dealing with significant challenges. Do you think that's a common thread in true crime cases?
Absolutely. Mental health plays a significant role in many criminal cases, though it's rarely a simple cause and effect relationship. It's often a complex interplay of factors, including mental illness, substance abuse, trauma, and social isolation.
So it's not about saying that all people with mental health issues are dangerous.
Not at all. In fact, the vast majority of people with mental illness are not violent.
Yeah.
But we do need to recognize that untreated mental health conditions can increase the risk of both victimization and perpetration of violence.
That makes sense. And it highlights the importance of providing accessible and comprehensive mental health resources. Early intervention treatment and ongoing support can make a world of difference.
You're absolutely right. We need to destigmatize mental illness and make it easier for people to seek help. We also need to invest in research to better understand the links between mental health and criminal behavior and develop more effective prevention and intervention strategies.
You know, listening to these stories, I can't help but think about the role of social media and technology. We saw how Heather Williams connected with her alleged killer on Facebook, and how disturbing text messages revealed a predatory relationship in Isaiah Harris's case.
Technology has undoubtedly changed the landscape of crime, creating new opportunities for both victims and perpetrators. It's a double-edged sword.
On the one hand, it can connect people and provide support, but on the other hand, it can be a tool for exploitation and abuse.
Precisely. And it's crucial to be aware of the potential dangers, especially for young people who may be more susceptible to online predators or cyberbullying.
It seems like parents, educators, and communities need to be more proactive in teaching young people about online safety.
I agree. Open communication, digital literacy, and critical thinking skills are essential. We need to empower young people to navigate the online world safely and responsibly.
Another aspect that really hits home for me is the impact of trauma on the victims and their families. These cases leave behind a trail of devastation, grief, and unanswered questions.
Trauma can have profound and long-lasting effects. It can affect physical health, mental well-being, relationships, and overall quality of life. It's not something that simply goes away with time.
So it's important to provide support, not just in the immediate aftermath of a crime,
Right.
but to the long haul.
Absolutely. Trauma-informed care is crucial. That means recognizing the impact of trauma, providing appropriate support and resources, and creating a sense of safety and empowerment for survivors.
You know, hearing all of these stories can leave you feeling pretty helpless.
Yeah.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the darkness and wonder if there's anything we can do to make a difference.
I understand that feeling. It's natural to feel overwhelmed in the face of such tragedy. But it's important to remember that even small acts of kindness, awareness, and advocacy can contribute to positive change.
So what are some concrete things our listeners can do? What small acts can make a difference?
Well, for starters, they can educate themselves about the issues we've discussed today. They can learn about the warning signs of abuse, mental health challenges, and online safety risks. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand these issues, the better equipped we are to address them.
And then they can share that knowledge with their families, friends, and communities.
Exactly. They can also support organizations working to prevent violence, advocate for better mental health resources, and engage in conversations about these critical issues.
And something we often overlook, they can simply offer support and compassion to those who have been affected by trauma. A listening ear, a helping hand, a kind word, these small gestures can make a world of difference.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing that we are all interconnected and that our collective actions can create a ripple effect of positive change.
You know, another case we discussed that's been weighing on me is the elderly couple found murdered in their home, their bodies hidden in a freezer by their own son. That one really got to me.
It's a particularly disturbing case because it violates our assumptions about family. We expect our loved ones to protect us, not to harm us, and yet violence within families is a tragic reality.
I remember you mentioned the police believe their son Shane killed his parents before entering into a suicide pact with his girlfriend Sue. But what could drive someone to commit such a horrific act against their own parents?
It's a question that's difficult to answer definitively. There's rarely a single explanation for such extreme acts of violence. It's often a combination of factors, including mental health issues, substance abuse, family dynamics, and situational stressors.
And the fact that they lived with the bodies for 6 months, that suggests a level of detachment and denial that's hard to fathom.
Absolutely. It speaks to a profound breakdown in mental and emotional functioning. And it highlights the importance of recognizing the warning signs of potential violence and seeking help when needed.
So what are some red flags people should be aware of? What are some signs that someone might be at risk of harming themselves or others?
That's a great question. There's no single profile of a potentially violent individual, but some common warning signs include a history of violence, threats of violence, substance abuse, severe mental health issues, social isolation, and access to weapons.
Those are definitely things to be aware of. But what do you do if you see these signs in someone? It can be scary to intervene, especially if it's someone you know.
You're right, it can be incredibly difficult. But it's crucial to remember that intervening early can potentially prevent a tragedy. If you're concerned about someone, reach out to mental health professionals, law enforcement, or other support services. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You might just save a life.
That's a powerful message. It's about recognizing that we have a collective responsibility to look out for each other and intervene when necessary.
Exactly. We can't always prevent these tragedies from happening, but we can create a culture of awareness, support, and early intervention that can make a difference.
We've talked a lot about violence, but another recurring theme in these cases is suicide. We saw it in the case of Shane and Sue, and also in Sue's online posts leading up to their deaths.
Suicide is a complex issue, and it's never the result of a single factor. It's often a combination of mental health struggles, feelings of hopelessness, and a loss of connection.
It's so important to talk about suicide to break down the stigma and to let people know that they're not alone.
Absolutely. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out for help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 at 988. There are also countless other resources available online and in your community.
That's a great resource to share, and it's a reminder that there is always hope, even in the darkest of times. We need to encourage people to seek help and support each other.
You're right. We need to foster a culture of compassion and understanding. And we need to work together to create a world where suicide is no longer a silent epidemic.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexities of these issues.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the sensationalism, but these cases are about real people, real lives, and real suffering.
That's why it's so important to approach these stories with empathy and a desire to understand the underlying issues. It's not about judging or sensationalizing, but about learning, reflecting, and working towards solutions.
You know, one thing that's been particularly unsettling is the role of chance in these cases. It feels like some of these victims were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's a common reaction. We want to believe that we have control over our lives, but the reality is that sometimes tragedy strikes randomly. It can be a difficult concept to grapple with.
It certainly makes you question your own sense of safety and security.
Absolutely. But I think it's important to remember that even in the face of uncertainty and randomness, we can still take steps to mitigate risk and create safer environments for ourselves and our communities.
So it's not about living in fear, but about being informed and proactive.
Exactly. It's about understanding the risks, taking reasonable precautions, and fostering a culture of awareness and support.
Another theme that keeps coming up is the idea of missed opportunities for intervention. It feels like in many of these cases, there were warning signs that were either ignored or not acted upon effectively.
You're right. And that's one of the most frustrating aspects of exploring these cases. It can feel like some of these tragedies could have been prevented if only someone had intervened sooner.
So how do we improve our ability to identify those warning signs and take action?
It's a complex question, but I think it starts with education and awareness. We need to teach people about the signs of mental health issues, substance abuse, and potential violence. We need to create environments where people feel comfortable seeking help and reporting concerns.
It sounds like it requires a shift in our culture. We need to move away from the stigma surrounding mental health and violence and embrace a more proactive approach to prevention.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that these are not individual problems, but societal issues that require a collective response.
I'm also struck by the sheer diversity of these cases. We've discussed everything from sexual assault allegations against a celebrity to a family annihilation case. It really highlights the wide spectrum of true crime and the many factors that contribute to it.
You're right. True crime is not a monolithic category. It encompasses a vast range of offenses, motivations, and circumstances. And that's what makes it both fascinating and challenging to study.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but I think it's important to engage with these stories even if they make us uncomfortable.
I agree. By confronting these dark realities, we can better understand ourselves, our society, and the complex forces that shape human behavior.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've explored the recurring themes of missed opportunities, the role of mental health, the impact of trauma, and the complexities of suicide.
It's been a heavy but important conversation. And as we move into the final part of our exploration, we'll continue to delve into these themes and examine the broader implications of these cases for individuals and society as a whole. We'll also discuss some potential solutions and steps we can all take to create a more compassionate and just world.
I'm looking forward to that. Stay with us for the final part of our deep dive into these unsettling but essential stories. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's been a heavy journey through these true crime cases, but I think we've uncovered some important insights along the way.
We've certainly explored some dark territory, but as we wrap up, I'm curious to hear what's resonated most with you. What stands out as particularly significant or thought-provoking?
Honestly, it's the recurring theme of missed opportunities. In nearly every case, there were warning signs, red flags that perhaps could have led to intervention before tragedy struck.
That's a keen observation, and it's a frustration shared by many who delve into true crime. It begs the question, what can we do to improve our systems and ourselves so those red flags don't go unnoticed?
Right, it's not about placing blame after the fact, but about proactively working towards prevention. So what are some concrete steps we can take? Where do we even begin to address these complex issues?
Well, one crucial area is early intervention. We need to equip ourselves to recognize the signs of potential violence, mental health struggles, and situations where someone is vulnerable to abuse. That means education both for ourselves and within our communities.
Education is key, absolutely. But it feels like there's a cultural hurdle to overcome as well.
Yeah.
We tend to shy away from these uncomfortable topics, especially mental health.
You've hit on a critical point. We need to break down the stigma surrounding mental health so that people feel comfortable seeking help and talking openly about their struggles. It needs to be as commonplace as discussing a physical ailment.
And that requires a shift in perspective, not just at the individual level, but also within our institutions. Schools, workplaces, healthcare providers. Everyone needs to be part of creating that supportive environment.
Yeah. Exactly. We also need to advocate for better access to mental health resources. Treatment shouldn't be a privilege. It needs to be readily available and affordable for everyone who needs it.
Thinking back to cases like Caleb Rehos' murder, where the perpetrator had a history of mental health issues and violence, it makes you wonder if the justice system could play a more proactive role as well.
It's a valid point. While accountability is essential, we also need to consider how the justice system can better address the root causes of crime, including mental health. That might mean specialized courts, diversion programs, or greater collaboration between law enforcement and mental health professionals.
It's about finding that delicate balance between protecting public safety and offering support to those who are struggling. And it's about ensuring that victims have a voice and access to resources throughout the legal process.
You've touched on another critical aspect, the needs of victims. Too often the focus is solely on the perpetrator, while victims are left to navigate the trauma and aftermath on their own. We need to do better.
Absolutely. Trauma-informed care should be the standard, not the exception. That means recognizing that trauma can have long-lasting effects and providing ongoing support and resources tailored to individual needs.
And it's not just about professional support. Communities, friends, and families play a vital role in helping victims heal and rebuild their lives. Sometimes just listening without judgment can make a world of difference.
We've discussed the devastating impact of violence within families, particularly the case of the elderly couple murdered by their own son. It's a harsh reminder that abuse can occur anywhere, even within the supposed safety of a home.
It challenges our assumptions about family and forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that those closest to us can sometimes be capable of unimaginable acts.
And it underscores the need for vigilance, both within our own families and within our communities. We can't afford to ignore warning signs or dismiss concerns about potential abuse.
Absolutely. If you see something, say something. It might feel awkward or intrusive, but it's always better to err on the side of caution. You might just be the one to prevent a tragedy.
Another case that stuck with me is Naziah Harris, the young girl who disappeared after a pattern of grooming and abuse by a family member. It's a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the need to be proactive in protecting them.
We need to teach children about body safety consent and healthy relationships from an early age. And we need to create environments where they feel safe and empowered to speak up if something feels wrong.
And that includes being vigilant about online safety, especially in today's digital world, where predators often lurk in the shadows of social media. Parents and caregivers need to be actively involved in their children's online lives, not out of a sense of control, but out of a desire to protect.
Precisely. It's about open communication, setting boundaries, and teaching children to be critical thinkers and discerning consumers of online content.
Amidst all the darkness we've explored, I'm also struck by the resilience of the human spirit. We've seen victims overcome incredible odds. Families find strength in the face of tragedy, and communities come together to support one another.
That's the glimmer of hope we can't afford to lose sight of. For every act of cruelty, there are countless acts of kindness, compassion, and courage. It's those acts, those choices that ultimately shape the world we live in.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they do to contribute to a safer, more just, and more compassionate world?
It starts with awareness. Educate yourself about these issues, listen to the stories of survivors, and be attuned to the warning signs within your own sphere of influence.
And it's about action. Support organizations working to prevent violence, advocate for better mental health resources, and challenge systems that perpetuate injustice.
Most importantly, be kind. Offer support to those who are struggling, speak out against injustice, and choose empathy over apathy. Even small acts can have a ripple effect, creating a more compassionate and just world for everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of true crime. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and perhaps even a catalyst for positive change. And don't forget to subscribe to the Deep Dive for more explorations into the dark side of humanity.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.